She's the one who didn't finish college, my father said, his champagne glass raised, 43 guests watching, at his own 60th birthday party. He said it the way you'd introduce a weather forecast, casually, like it was just a fact everyone already knew. I stood there in a fitted black blazer, my hands steady, my smile rehearsed. What he didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the business card in my pocket would hit harder than any speech I could give, and within 60 seconds, his champagne glass would be in pieces on the marble floor. But I need to back up. Because the moment that broke everything didn't start at that party. It started 5 years earlier in a dorm room with a phone call that changed my life. Before I go on, if this story resonates with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely connect with what you hear. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to know. My name is Tori, I'm 28. And this is the story of how I handed my father the truth he spent 5 years trying to bury. Now let me take you back, 5 years, to the night I told my dad I was dropping out of college. It was October. I was 22, a junior. I'd started college a year late after working to save tuition money. That detail matters because Gerald never let me forget it. I was sitting cross-legged on my dorm bed in Austin, laptop open to a spreadsheet I'd been building for 3 weeks. Revenue projections, customer acquisition costs, conversion funnels. Words I'd learned not in a classroom, but behind the counter of a restaurant where I bussed tables and watched the owner lose money every single night because his reservation system was a spiral notebook and a prayer. I'd found something, a gap in the market so wide I could drive a truck through it. Small restaurants, the ones with 12 tables and a handwritten menu, had no affordable software to manage bookings. The big platforms ignored them. I didn't. I picked up my phone and called my father. Gerald Warden, retired senior accountant, a man who measured the world in degrees, titles, and decimal points. I told him everything. The idea. The prototype I'd already started coding at night. The 3 restaurant owners who said they'd pay for it tomorrow if it existed. He let me finish. That was the cruelest part. The silence that made me think he was actually listening. Then he spoke. So you're quitting? Not a question. A verdict. Dad, I'm not quitting. Your brother would never do this. Kyle was 22, still in school, still checking every box Gerald had drawn for him. Of course, Kyle would never do this. Dad, if you'd just look at the numbers. The line went dead. No goodbye. No, let me think about it. No, I love you, but I'm worried. Just the flat silence of a disconnected call. I sat on that bed for a long time, phone in my lap, screen dark. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I was crying because I already knew. That click wasn't just the end of a phone call. It was the end of the version of my father who might have listened. I didn't know yet that the next version would be so much worse. 3 weeks later, I called my grandmother on her birthday. Nana Ruth, 81 years old, sharp as a tack, the kind of woman who remembers every grandchild's shoe size. Tori, sweetheart. Her voice was warm. Then it shifted. Careful. Your father told me you're working at a diner somewhere, waiting tables. Honey, are you eating enough? My stomach dropped. Nana, that's not exactly... He said you quit school because you just couldn't handle it, not because you were sick or anything. He wants us all to pray for you. Pray for me, like I was in hospice. I called Gerald that night. He picked up on the first ring, almost like he was expecting it. Why did you tell Nana I'm a waitress? I told her the truth. You dropped out. You wait tables. His voice was smooth, reasonable. That is what happened, Tori. I'm building a company, Dad. He laughed. Not loud. Just a soft exhale through his nose. The kind of laugh designed to make you feel 6 inches tall. Sweetheart, everyone with a laptop thinks they're an entrepreneur. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Then I found out the rest. My friend Kelsey from freshman year texted me a screenshot. A voicemail Gerald had left her. He said I was going through a rough time and suggested she give me space. My roommate Jess got a similar call. So did Tanya from my study group. 3 calls, 3 of my closest friends. 2 of them stopped texting me within a month. Gerald wasn't just disappointed. He was building a narrative, calling the right people at the right time with the right tone. Concerned father, heartbroken, just looking out for his little girl. He was erasing me, methodically, and I was only beginning to understand why. 1 year after dropping out, my life looked like this. A 400-square-foot studio apartment in East Austin with a window that didn't close all the way. A desk made from a door balanced on 2 filing cabinets. A coffee maker that only worked if you hit it twice on the left side. I coded 16 hours a day. I waited tables 5 nights a week at a Tex-Mex place on South Congress. I ate ramen so often the sodium made my fingers swell. The product was called Slate, a booking and table management platform for independent restaurants. Nothing flashy, no AI, no blockchain buzzwords. Just a clean, simple system that let a 12-table Italian place stop losing reservations written on napkins. My first 3 customers were all restaurants I'd worked at. They trusted me because I'd carried their plates and memorized their regulars' names. They paid $49 a month each, $147 in monthly recurring revenue. I remember staring at that number on my dashboard and thinking, this is real. Gerald called on Thanksgiving. I almost didn't pick up. Your cousin Jacob just got promoted to VP, he said. No hello. No how are you? 26 years old, same age as you. I said nothing. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, Tori. I'm trying to motivate you. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm until it left a white crescent. Thanks, Dad. Come home for Christmas. We can talk about getting you back into school. I know a few people at UConn who could. I have to go. I hung up first. It was the first time I'd ever hung up on Gerald Warden. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Something had shifted. Something small and hard had lodged itself behind my ribs, and it was already beginning to grow. Gerald thought that call would push me back to campus. He was wrong. It pushed me further into the only thing I had left, the work. I flew home for Christmas anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I thought showing up would prove something. Maybe I still believed that if I just stood in the same room as my father, he'd eventually see me. Mom opened the door. Brenda Warden, 56, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who communicates love through casseroles and avoids conflict like it's a house fire. She hugged me a beat too long. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. The living room was full. 15 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Gerald stood by the fireplace in a pressed blue shirt, holding court with a glass of bourbon. He saw me, didn't stand, didn't walk over, just raised his glass an inch. Well, look who made it. A cousin asked what I was up to these days. Gerald answered before I could open my mouth. She's figuring things out, aren't you, sweetheart? That voice, dripping with pity. The whole room gave me the look. The one you give a stray dog that wandered in from the rain. I tried. Actually, I'm building a... Kyle, tell everyone about the Anderson account. Gerald pivoted to my brother without blinking, like I'd never spoken at all. After dinner, he found me in the kitchen, alone, loading the dishwasher. He leaned against the counter and spoke quietly, almost gently. Don't embarrass me in front of everyone with your little business. When you have something real, we'll talk. I didn't answer. I finished the dishes. I grabbed my coat. I was halfway to the car when Mom caught up. She pressed a tin of her sugar cookies into my hands. She didn't say a word. She just pulled me close, held on for 5 seconds, and walked back inside. I drove to the airport at 8 p.m. on Christmas night. The cookies lasted 3 days. The silence from my mother, that lasted much longer. And it cut in places Gerald's words couldn't reach. Year 2. Slate had 50 restaurants on the platform. I hired my first 2 employees, a junior developer named Marco and a customer support rep named Sienna, who worked from her kitchen table in Waco. We were scrappy. We were growing. But back in Connecticut, Gerald was growing something too. He'd upgraded the story. I wasn't just waiting tables anymore. Now I was unstable. Now I was not doing well. He told the family in the voice he'd perfected. Low, heavy with concern, the voice of a father carrying a burden no one else could understand. "I worry about her," he'd say. "I don't think she's okay." The effects were surgical. My cousin Dana stopped inviting me to her annual 4th of July cookout. Aunt Pam sent me a prayer chain email. Nana Ruth called less and less. And when she did, she spoke to me like I was made of glass. Kyle phoned one night, cautious. "Dad told me you don't want to talk to anyone, that you asked for space." I nearly dropped my coffee. "Kyle, I never said that. He's the one who, I know. I didn't know what to believe." Gerald had flipped it. He wasn't pushing me out. According to his story, I was pulling away. I was the one isolating myself. He was just the worried father, helpless at the margins. I made one last attempt. I called him. "Dad, I need you to stop telling people things that aren't true about me." "Everything I said is true." His voice was calm, practiced. "You dropped out. You wait tables. What part is wrong?" Technically, parts were true. I had dropped out. I had waited tables. But he was using half-truths the way a locksmith uses picks, carefully, precisely, to open doors that should have stayed shut. I hung up. And I made a decision that would hold for the next 3 years. I would stop explaining. I would let the results speak. And if Gerald never heard them, that was his choice. I didn't know yet that he would hear them, in the worst possible way, on the best possible night. Year 3 is when he crossed the line from words into action. Slate was growing fast. 120 restaurants. Real revenue. I was negotiating our first major contract, a regional chain called Reynolds Hospitality Group. 14 locations across Texas and Oklahoma. If we landed it, the deal would be worth $80,000 annually and put us on the map. Their due diligence was standard: background checks, reference calls, a Google search on Tory Warden. The email arrived on a Tuesday at 9:47 a.m. I still remember the exact time because I was holding a coffee that went cold in my hand while I read it. "Ms. Warden, we spoke with a family member who raised concerns about your personal stability and professional reliability. After careful consideration, we've decided to pursue a different vendor." My chest tightened. I knew. Gerald still had his old accounting network, people who knew people in every industry across the Northeast. And I'd made one mistake. I'd mentioned the name Reynolds to Kyle on the phone 2 months earlier, casual, excited, before I remembered the rule I'd set for myself. Kyle must have mentioned it at Sunday dinner. It only took Gerald one name and 48 hours on LinkedIn. I called Gerald. He picked up on the second ring. "Did you call Reynolds Corp?" "I was looking out for you. You cost me a contract. If your business can't survive one phone call, it wasn't real. That's not your decision to make." A pause. Then his voice, harder now, the mask slipping. "I'm your father. Everything about you is my decision." I ended the call. My hands were trembling, but I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I set it face down on my desk, opened my laptop, and started an email to 4 other potential clients. $80,000. Gone because Gerald Warden found a LinkedIn profile and made a phone call. Not out of love, not out of concern, out of control. Pure, cold, architectural control. He'd moved from gossip to sabotage, from dinner table whispers to destroying my livelihood. And something inside me, the thing that had lodged behind my ribs 2 years ago, locked into place like a deadbolt. I was done defending, done explaining, done bleeding for a man who kept sharpening the knife. From this point on, Gerald would get nothing. No updates, no arguments, no chances, just silence. Until silence wasn't enough anymore. Losing Reynolds nearly broke Slate. I had to let Sienna go. I couldn't look her in the eye when I told her. She said, "I understand, Tori," and that was worse than if she'd yelled. I sold my car, a 10-year-old Civic that barely passed inspection, for $3,000. I took the bus. I slept on the couch in our shared office space because my lease was up and I couldn't sign a new one. That was the month I started therapy. I found Dr. Nguyen through a sliding scale directory. She had a small office near campus with a crooked fern on her windowsill and a box of tissues that never seemed to run out. In our third session, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Why don't you just tell your family the truth? Because he'll find a way to make it small. He always does. She tilted her head. And if he does? Then I'll have given him another weapon. Dr. Nguyen leaned forward. Tori, you don't need him to believe you. You need you to believe you. I stared at the crooked fern. I'd been watering someone else's opinion of me for 3 years and wondering why I felt so dry. That night I made 2 decisions. First, no one in the Warden family would receive any information about Slate, my finances, or my professional life. Gerald couldn't destroy what he couldn't see. Second, I would build this company so quietly and so well that when the truth finally surfaced, and truth always surfaces, no speech would be necessary. On Friday, I opened my inbox to a message I'd almost missed between spam. Subject line, interested in Slate, can we talk? Sender, Patricia Voss, former CTO of a publicly traded restaurant tech company. Angel investor. The kind of name you Google and then sit very still for a minute. I sat very still for a minute. Then I replied. Patricia Voss was 53, silver-haired, direct, and terrifying in the best possible way. She'd built and sold 2 companies before I was old enough to drive. She took the meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. No office, no assistant, just a black Americano and a legal pad. I pitched for 20 minutes. She asked questions for 40, not softball questions, hard ones. What's your churn rate? How do you handle restaurants that cancel after onboarding? What happens when Toast or OpenTable builds the same feature? I answered everyone. Not perfectly, but honestly. And when I didn't know something, I said, I don't know yet. Here's how I'd find out. She put her pen down. I like that you don't pretend. Most founders fake it until they forget what's real. 2 weeks later, Patricia Voss invested $200,000 for 15% of Slate Systems. She also became my mentor, the first person in my professional life who looked at what I was building and said, this matters. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment, still the same 400 square feet, still the same broken window, and held my phone. I scrolled to Mom. I wanted to tell her, God, I wanted to tell her. But I knew the math. Anything Brenda Warden heard at dinner, Gerald Warden heard by dessert. I put the phone down. Instead, I called Uncle Ray. Ray Warden, my father's younger brother, 53, quiet, lived in Portland, sold handmade furniture. Never once asked me when I was going back to school. I told him everything. The company, Patricia, the revenue, the plan. He listened without interrupting. A Warden family trait, apparently, just deployed differently. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then, I always knew you'd figure it out, kid. Don't let anyone make you small. I cried. For the first time in 2 years, I cried because something good was happening and someone who shared my last name actually noticed. Year 4 is when the irony got so thick I could choke on it. Slate Systems had 500 restaurants on the platform, 20 employees, $3 million in annual revenue. We'd moved into a real office, glass walls, standing desks, a kitchen that actually had food in the refrigerator. Forbes ran a feature in their digital edition, a roundup of emerging restaurant tech founders. Slate was highlighted. My name was in the article. Slate was featured. My name was in the article. But I'd specifically asked the journalist not to include my photograph. She thought it was modesty. It wasn't. It was strategy. Uncle Ray called the day after Thanksgiving. You're never going to believe this. Try me. Your father spent 20 minutes at the dinner table raving about some brilliant tech company that's transforming the restaurant industry. He read about it in Forbes. He was practically pounding the table. I closed my eyes. He said, and I'm quoting, "This is the kind of thing I wish Tori had the brains to build." The silence between us stretched for 5 full seconds. I almost choked on my turkey, Ray said. I laughed. It came out short and sharp like a cough. There was no humor in it. My father was praising my work at the same table where he pitied my failure. Same meal, same breath. Don't tell him, Uncle Ray, not yet. I won't, he paused. But someday, Tori, he's going to find out, and when he does, I want a front row seat. I hung up and sat with it. Gerald Warden, the man who told 40 relatives his daughter was a struggling waitress, was now a fan of her company. He just didn't know the waitress and the CEO were the same person. That Thanksgiving, he carved a turkey and my reputation in the same room. He celebrated Slate and mourned Tori without realizing they were the same story. I saved Uncle Ray's voicemail. I had a feeling I'd want to hear it again someday. Kyle got engaged in February. I found out through Instagram. A photo of him and Jessica, beaming, a ring catching the light, captioned, "She said yes," on a story I almost swiped past. He hadn't told me. Or rather, Gerald hadn't let him. Kyle called 2 days later. His voice was tight with guilt. "Dad said you were too busy to come to the engagement party. I should have called you myself. I'm really sorry, Tori." "It's okay, Kyle. Congratulations. I mean it." It wasn't okay, but Kyle wasn't the enemy, and I wasn't going to make him feel worse than he already did. The party had already happened. 30 guests at the house in Westport. Gerald's full production, caterer, champagne, a toast that apparently made Jessica's mother cry. I heard the details from Dana, my cousin, the one who'd stopped inviting me to her cookouts, until she didn't. She called that night, hesitant. "I need to tell you something." I sat down. "Your dad told everyone at the party that you're still waitressing somewhere in Texas, that he's given up hope." She paused. I heard her swallow. Then he pulled Jessica's parents aside, like he was confiding in them, and told them you dropped out because of emotional problems. I didn't move. He said it so quietly, Tori, so sincere, like it was breaking his heart to admit it, but it felt calculated. "Thank you for telling me, Dana." "Are you okay?" No, I was not okay. My father had just told my brother's future in-laws, people I'd never met, that I was mentally ill. He'd poisoned a well I hadn't even arrived at yet, but I kept my voice level. "I will be." I hung up, walked to my bathroom mirror, and looked at myself for a long time. The woman staring back at me ran a company worth 8 figures. She employed 20 people. She'd been featured in Forbes, and her own father was introducing her as a cautionary tale to strangers at family parties she wasn't invited to. Something crystallized in that mirror, not anger, something colder, something with a deadline. Gerald's 60th birthday was 10 months away. By March of year 5, Slate Systems closed its Series A round. $40 million valuation. I owned 55%, 65 employees, 2,000 restaurant clients across 30 states. I hired a personal driver named Marcus, former Army. 6'2", quiet in a way that made rooms adjust when he walked in. He drove a black Lincoln that I didn't need but had earned. I bought a penthouse in downtown Austin. I furnished it simply. No art on the walls yet. I still wore the same 3 blazers in rotation. I still didn't post on social media. I was building a life, not a brand. Uncle Ray called in April. "Your dad's 60th is in June. Your mother asked me to ask you to come." I stared out the window at the Austin skyline. "Did she ask? Or did he?" "She asked. Gerald doesn't know I'm calling. Honestly, he probably assumes you won't show up." I was quiet for a long time, long enough that Ray said, "You still there?" "I'm thinking." I brought it to Dr. Nguyen the next week. We'd been doing sessions for 2 years by then. She knew the whole map, every phone call, every holiday, every scar Gerald had left with words that sounded reasonable on the surface and drew blood underneath. "What do you want from going?" she asked. I looked at the fern. It had grown since I started coming. Straighter now. "I want it to be over. I want to stop being the version of me that he invented." She nodded, wrote nothing down. That meant it was important. I called Ray that night. "I'll be there, but I'm doing it my way." After we hung up, I opened my desk drawer, took out a business card, cream stock, embossed lettering. Tori Warden, CEO, Slate Systems. I slid it into my wallet. Then I called Marcus. "June 15th, Connecticut. Clear your schedule." "Yes, ma'am." 3 words. That's all it took to set the final piece in motion. But before that night arrived, Gerald would do one more thing, one final thing. The thing that almost made me cancel everything. And the thing that guaranteed I wouldn't. 2 weeks before the party, my phone rang at 8 a.m. The caller ID showed a New York area code. I picked up, expecting a sales call. Ms. Warden, this is David Park from Crestline Ventures. We're currently evaluating Slate Systems for a potential growth stage investment. Of course, how can I help? A beat of silence. The professional kind. The kind that means someone's choosing their words carefully. I'll be direct. Someone claiming to be your father contacted our firm yesterday. He suggested we, and I'm quoting, do our due diligence on her mental health history before committing capital. The room tilted, just for a second. Here's what I pieced together afterward. Gerald had been Googling my name periodically for years. Kyle let it slip once. Dad checks on you online sometimes. To Gerald, that was parenting. He'd seen my name connected to Slate Systems in a trade article, but never read past the headline. He didn't know I was CEO. He didn't know the valuation. He just saw the word investment next to his dropout daughter's name and decided to do what he always did, control the story before anyone else could tell it. He found Crestline's general number on their website and called. He said you had a history of instability, that you dropped out of college due to psychological issues, and that your judgment was, in his words, compromised. I pressed my palm flat against my desk. Is there something we should know? David asked. My voice came out even, steady, professional. 5 years of practice. There is nothing to know, Mr. Park. I'd encourage you to speak with Patricia Voss, my lead investor, or any of our current partners. My track record speaks for itself. That's what we figured. Patricia already vouched for you in the strongest terms. I just wanted to give you the courtesy of knowing. I appreciate that. I hung up. Sat still. Then I slammed my hand on the desk so hard the pen cup fell over. Gerald had called my investors. Not a cousin over Thanksgiving dinner. Not a college friend. A venture capital firm managing 9 figures in assets. He'd tried to torpedo a multi-million-dollar investment with a lie about my sanity. This wasn't a father being disappointed. This wasn't tough love. This was a man who would rather see his daughter fail publicly than lose control of the story he told about her. I called Uncle Ray. My voice was flat. He called my investors, Ray. Told them I'm mentally unstable. Silence. Then, Jesus, Tori. Am I still coming to the party? Ray took a breath. Are you? I looked at the business card in my wallet. Cream stock, embossed. I wouldn't miss it. June 15th, late afternoon, Connecticut. Marcus pulled the Lincoln to the curb 3 houses down from my parents' home in Westport. Through the windshield, I could see the house where I grew up. White colonial, black shutters, a porch I used to read on until the streetlights came on. Tonight it was dressed for a celebration. White lanterns hung from the elm trees along the front walk. A catering van sat in the driveway. Through the tall windows, I could see people moving, laughing, holding champagne flutes that caught the golden light. 43 guests. I'd asked Uncle Ray for the count. I checked myself in the visor mirror. Black blazer, tailored, white silk blouse, black trousers, simple heels. A small face watch on my left wrist. The first expensive thing I ever bought myself. The week Slate hit $1 million in revenue. No other jewelry, no statement pieces. I didn't need the clothes to speak. The card would do that. I touched my jacket pocket. Still there. You good? Marcus asked from the front seat. He was watching me in the rear view, his expression neutral. He'd driven me to pitch meetings, investor dinners, late nights at the office. He'd never seen my hands shake. They were shaking now. Park here. When I text you, come to the front door. Just walk in and say the car is ready. Copy. I opened the door. The summer air hit me. Warm, thick with fresh-cut grass and someone's perfume drifting from the backyard. I walked up the path I'd walked 1,000 times as a kid. Past the mailbox with Warden stenciled in black. Past the garden Mom replanted every spring. The front door was open. I stepped inside. Mom saw me first. Brenda Warden stood near the kitchen threshold, holding a glass of white wine she clearly wasn't drinking. Her eyes went wide, then soft, then wet. She set the glass down and crossed the room. Her arms wrapped around me. Tighter than Christmas, tighter than the airport, tighter than any hug she'd given me since I was small. I'm glad you're here, she whispered. Over her shoulder, Gerald turned. He stood by the fireplace, surrounded by 3 men in sport coats, the golf friends. He held a champagne glass loosely. He registered my face, and for one flicker of a second, something moved behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe unease. Then the mask slid on. "Well, look who showed up." Same words he'd used at Christmas 3 years ago. Same tone, like I was a weather event he hadn't planned for. I smiled, said nothing, and walked into the room. The party moved around me like a current. I drifted through it, a handshake here, a polite nod there. I recognized most faces: Aunt Pam with her prayer chain smile, Cousin Jacob, the VP Gerald loved to mention, neighbors from down the street who used to bring us pie on Sundays. They were friendly, cautious, the way people are friendly to someone they've been warned about. "Tori, how are you, honey?" Aunt Pam tilted her head at a precise 45-degree angle of pity. "Are you still in food service?" "Something like that." She waited for more. I gave her nothing. She sipped her wine and moved on. Gerald found me near the appetizer table and steered me by the elbow toward his golf foursome, 3 men in their 60s with firm handshakes and country club tans. "Gentlemen, this is my daughter Tori." He paused just long enough. "She's finding herself." A polite chuckle from the group. One of them, a man named Ed, looked at me with genuine curiosity. Gerald moved on before Ed could ask a follow-up. Next, Jessica's parents, Richard and Maureen. The in-laws Gerald had already briefed about my emotional problems. Gerald placed his hand on my shoulder, proprietary, warm, performing. "This is Tori, our free spirit. Didn't quite finish the college thing." He smiled like he was sharing a charming family anecdote. "But we love her anyway, don't we?" Maureen's smile was tight. Richard looked at his shoes. I said, "Nice to meet you both." My voice was steady. My eyes were clear. Kyle passed behind me as Gerald moved to greet another cluster of guests. My brother's hand found mine, squeezed once. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should say something." "Don't. Not tonight. This is his show." Kyle's jaw tightened. He nodded and stepped away. I stood alone for a moment near the window. Outside, the lanterns swayed in a warm breeze. Inside, 43 people drank and laughed and lived inside a story Gerald had written. A story where I was the cautionary tale, the dropout, the failure, the one they loved anyway. I slipped my hand into my blazer pocket. The card was there, waiting. Let him finish his show, I thought. The script is about to change. At 7:30, Gerald tapped his champagne glass with a butter knife. The room settled. Conversations dissolved into silence. 43 faces turned toward the man standing at the head of the dining table, framed by white lanterns and a banner that read, "Happy 60th Gerald." He was good at this. I'll give him that. Gerald Warden could hold a room the way some people hold a tune, effortlessly, with the kind of authority that made you forget he'd practiced every word in the bathroom mirror. "Thank you all for being here tonight. 60 years. He shook his head with rehearsed wonder. "I look around this room and I see every person who made those years worth living." He thanked Brenda. She smiled from her chair, the smile of a woman who had learned to perform gratitude on cue. He thanked his golf buddies, his former colleagues, the neighbors, then the children. "Kyle," Gerald raised his glass toward my brother. "Couldn't be prouder. College degree, great career, a beautiful fiancé." He gestured to Jessica. The room applauded. Kyle shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with praise he hadn't asked for. Then Gerald turned to me. His voice changed, softer, heavier. The voice he used when he told relatives he worried about me. The voice of a man performing sorrow. "And Tori." He found me at the back of the room. "My daughter." A pause that held the weight of 5 years. "The one who didn't finish college." He shook his head slowly, smiled with closed lips. "But we love her anyway, don't we?" Scattered laughter, a few sympathetic nods. Someone near the kitchen whispered something I couldn't hear. Aunt Pam pressed her hand to her chest like she was watching a sad commercial. Brenda closed her eyes. Kyle's knuckles went white around his fork. Uncle Ray set his glass on the table with a deliberate clink. And I stood at the back of that room, spine straight, face calm, hands still. I smiled. Not a brave smile, not a bitter one, a patient one. I slid my hand into my pocket. My fingers closed around the business card. 5 years. He just did it one last time. Good. The applause faded. Glasses clinked. The room returned to its hum of small talk and laughter. I moved. Not fast, not dramatic. I walked the length of the dining room the way I walked into investor meetings. Measured, unhurried, certain. Past the appetizer table, past Aunt Pam, past the golf foursome. Every pair of eyes in the room tracked me without realizing they were watching. Gerald was still standing, champagne in hand, basking in the warm residue of his own toast. I stopped in front of him, close enough that no one could miss it, far enough that it wasn't confrontational. "Happy birthday, Dad," my voice carried. Not loud, just clear. The room quieted by instinct, the way a room always quiets when it senses something is about to happen. "I brought you a gift." I reached into my blazer pocket. "It's small, but I think you'll appreciate it." I placed the business card in his open hand. Gerald looked down. His eyes moved across the text. I watched them, left to right, then back again, the way you reread a sentence that doesn't make sense the first time. Tory Warden, CEO, Slate Systems. His lips parted. No sound came out. Slate Systems. The company he'd raved about at Thanksgiving dinner. The company he'd called brilliant. The company he'd wished his daughter had the brains to build. His eyes lifted, met mine. I watched the recognition hit, not all at once but in waves. First confusion, then disbelief, then a slow, flooding horror that started at his pupils and spread outward like ink in water. His fingers loosened. The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. 43 guests stared at Gerald Warden, his hand still open, his face white, champagne and broken glass pooling at his polished shoes. No one moved. No one breathed. I stood exactly where I was, hands at my sides, my heart hammering so hard I was sure the whole room could hear it. But my face gave them nothing. The silence lasted 4 seconds. It felt like 40. Someone near the kitchen said, "What happened? What's on the card?" Gerald didn't answer. He couldn't. He stood frozen, staring at the small rectangle in his hand like it had caught fire. Kyle stepped forward. He took the card gently from Gerald's fingers, turned it over, and read it aloud. His voice was steady, but I could see the vein in his neck pulsing. Tory Warden, CEO, Slate Systems. A murmur rolled through the room, low, electric, gathering speed. Slate Systems? Ed from the golf group frowned. "Wait, isn't that the company?" "Oh my God," Aunt Pam said. Her hand was on her mouth now, not her chest. Cousin Jacob, the VP, the golden standard Gerald measured everyone against, pulled out his phone and typed something. His eyes went wide. He showed his screen to the person next to him. They showed the next person. Maureen, Jessica's mother, looked at Gerald with an expression I'd never seen on a stranger's face before, pity for the wrong person. She turned to her husband. Richard's jaw was tight. Uncle Ray didn't move from his chair. He lifted his glass an inch. Not a toast, not a performance, just a quiet salute. And his eyes were red. Gerald found his voice. It came out cracked. "Tory," he swallowed. "Is this? It's real, Dad. It's been real for 5 years. Why didn't you tell me?" The question landed in the center of the room like a stone in still water. The entire room held its breath. I looked at my father. At the man who had shaped my childhood and shattered my 20s. At the man who bragged about my company while burying my name. I did, I said. My voice didn't waver. You called it a laptop fantasy, remember? Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Behind me, I heard my mother. Not words, just the soft, strangled sound of a woman who'd held it together for 5 years and couldn't hold it anymore. Brenda Warden was crying, her hand pressed over her lips, tears running silently down her wrist. The front door opened. Marcus stepped inside. Black suit, posture that said military before his mouth said anything at all. He scanned the room once, a habit, not a choice, and then looked directly at me. Ms. Warden, the car is ready whenever you are. Ms. Warden. 2 words, said with the practiced calm of someone who said them every day. Every head in the room turned, from Marcus to me, from the driver in the doorway to the woman Gerald had introduced 20 minutes ago as a dropout who couldn't finish college. Gerald looked at Marcus, looked at me. His face was doing something I'd never seen, not anger, not sadness, but the expression of a man watching a building he constructed brick by brick collapse from the inside. I turned to him one last time. I wanted you to be proud of me, Dad. My voice was quiet, steady, no tremor, no heat. For a long time, that was the only thing I wanted. I let that settle. But you chose to be ashamed of someone you never bothered to know. Gerald's hand moved, reaching toward me, or toward the card, or toward something he'd already lost. I'll never know, because I didn't wait. I'm not here to prove you wrong. I'm here to stop needing you to see me. I turned to my mother, took her hands. She was shaking. I pulled her close and whispered against her hair. I love you, Mom. Call me when you're ready. She nodded. Couldn't speak. I found Kyle, took his hand, squeezed it. I'm proud of you. Truly. This doesn't change that. His eyes were glassy. He squeezed back. Then Uncle Ray. He stood from his chair. He didn't say a word. Just wrapped his arms around me the way he had when I was 9 years old and fell off his porch and refused to cry. I stepped back, straightened my blazer, walked to the door. Marcus held it open. I didn't look back. Not because I was too proud, because if I looked back, I would see my father's face, and some part of me, the little girl who used to ride on his shoulders at the park, might have stayed. And I couldn't stay. Not anymore. The night air hit my skin as I stepped out. Warm, quiet, the lantern still glowing behind me, the Lincoln waiting at the curb. I walked toward it. Behind me, through the open door, I heard nothing. No shouting, no footsteps, just the enormous suffocating silence of 43 people who had just watched a story rewrite itself. Marcus pulled away from the curb slowly. No rush. The headlights swept across the front of the house, and then we were past it, turning onto the tree-lined road I used to bike down every summer. I watched the house shrink in the side mirror, the white columns, the lanterns, the warm glow of a party that had gone very, very quiet. Marcus drove. I sat. Neither of us spoke. We were 2 miles from the highway when it hit me. Not the satisfaction, not the relief, just the weight. All at once, like a dam breaking, 5 years of held breath releasing in a single, silent flood. I cried. Not the way I cried in my dorm room 5 years ago. Not the way I cried when Uncle Ray said he was proud of me. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you don't have a name for it. I wasn't crying because I won. I was crying because I'd spent 5 years hoping I wouldn't have to do this. I was crying for the father I lost on a phone call when I was 23. For the Christmases I drove to the airport alone. For every time someone said, "Your dad told me," and I knew what came next. I was crying because a little girl who once believed her father was the tallest man in the world just handed him a piece of paper and watched him shrink. Marcus reached over the seat without turning around and placed a tissue on the armrest beside me. He said nothing. He didn't need to. I wiped my face. Breathed in, breathed out. I opened my phone. 7 missed calls. Gerald, 3, Brenda, 2, Kyle, 1, Dana, 1. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I opened notes and typed 5 words. I showed up. I'm enough. Then I called Dr. Nguyen's office and booked an appointment for the following Tuesday. The highway opened up ahead of us. Dark sky, clear lane. I leaned my head against the cool glass and closed my eyes. It wasn't over. I knew that. But the hardest part was done. I had introduced myself. The next morning I was back in Austin. Same desk, same view of the skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. But something in the room was different, or maybe something in me was. I called my attorney at 9 sharp. Rachel, I need you to draft a cease and desist letter. She didn't flinch. Rachel Briggs had been my counsel since the Series A. She'd seen the Reynolds situation. She knew the backstory. Who's the recipient? My father, Gerald Warden. A brief pause. Professional, not personal. What specifically are we addressing? 2 documented instances of unauthorized contact with my business associates, Reynolds Hospitality in year 3 and Crestline Ventures 2 weeks ago. Both times he made false statements about my mental fitness to conduct business. That's tortious interference and defamation per se under Connecticut and Texas law. I want it clean, Rachel. No emotion, just the facts and the consequences if he continues. Tori, are you sure? He's your father. That's exactly why it has to be formal. Informal didn't work for 5 years. Rachel said she'd have the draft by end of day. I spent the next hour composing an email. Not to Gerald, to the family. I revised it 4 times before it felt right. Clear without being cold, honest without being vindictive. I love this family, but I won't accept being lied about anymore. If anyone has questions about my life, my career, or my well-being, ask me directly. Not Dad. I'm not the person he described, and I think some of you are beginning to understand that. My door is open. It always has been. I hit send, set the phone face down, pressed my palms flat on the desk and breathed. Patricia Voss called that afternoon. I heard what happened. News travels fast. Good news should. Her voice was warm, certain. You handled it with more grace than anyone I know. The board is behind you 100%. I thanked her. We talked for a few minutes about next quarter's projections, normal work, normal life, the kind of conversation I'd fought 5 years to have without looking over my shoulder. When we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office and realized something. The cease and desist wasn't punishment. The email wasn't revenge. They were borders, real, visible lines that said, you may love me, but you may not lie about me. You may disagree with me, but you may not sabotage me. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks. And I just changed the key. Uncle Ray called 2 days after the party. Thought you'd want a report from the front. Go ahead. Gerald had locked himself in his study the entire day after his birthday. Brenda brought him coffee twice. He didn't touch it. The caterer came to pick up the rented glassware at noon, and Gerald didn't come out to sign the invoice. Brenda handled it. Ray said Gerald spent hours on his computer, searching, reading. He found everything, Tori, Forbes, TechCrunch, the Series A announcement, your LinkedIn, all of it. I stared at the ceiling. He called Kyle that night, asked if Kyle knew. Kyle said no. Ray paused. Then Kyle said something I didn't expect. What? He said, no, Dad, I didn't, because you made sure none of us knew the real Tori. I closed my eyes. And your mother? Ray's voice shifted, softer. Gerald asked Brenda why she didn't tell him. She said, and I'm only telling you this because she told me directly. She said, tell you what, Gerald? You never listen. You never listen to her. You never listen to me. My breath stopped. Brenda, my quiet, careful, casserole-making mother, the woman who hadn't contradicted Gerald in 30 years of marriage. She really said that? Word for word. I didn't know what to do with that information. It was too big to feel all at once, so I put it somewhere safe and moved on. Has he tried to call me? 4 times, left voicemails, First one was, Tori, we need to talk. Second was, I didn't know. Third was just, please. And the fourth? Silence. 30 seconds of dead air. Then he hung up. I imagined Gerald sitting in his study, surrounded by bookshelves and framed certificates and a lifetime of curated accomplishments, staring at a phone that wouldn't ring back. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt like someone had pulled a splinter out of a wound that had been infected for 5 years. It hurt worse coming out than it did going in. But the infection was over. The fallout wasn't dramatic. It was social, quiet, relentless. Within a week, the story had traveled through the entire Warden family tree like water through cracks in a foundation. Not because anyone was gossiping maliciously, but because the truth, once spoken, has a velocity that lies can never match. Nana Ruth called me on a Wednesday morning. She was crying before I picked up. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I believed every word he said. I should have called you more. I should have asked. It's not your fault, Nana. It is. A grandmother is supposed to know. Her voice broke. You must have been so lonely. I bit the inside of my cheek. I had some good people. Well, now you have me again. And I'm not going anywhere. The golf group was less forgiving. Ray told me Gerald showed up for his usual Saturday round and felt the temperature shift before anyone said a word. Ed, the one who'd seemed curious about me at the party, was the one who said it. Gerald, I've known you 15 years. You sat at my table and trashed your own daughter, and she's running a company worth more than every business on this street combined? That's the worst thing I've ever heard a father do. Gerald didn't finish the round. Then came the in-laws. Jessica's parents, Richard and Maureen, called Kyle. Maureen was direct. Your father told us Tori had emotional problems. He looked us in the eye at our first family event and lied. Kyle, that concerns us. Kyle told me about the call. He sounded tired. They're not mad at you. They're mad at Dad. But it's creating tension. Jessica's worried. I'm sorry, Kyle. Don't be. This is on him. All of it. The cease and desist arrived at Gerald's house on a Thursday. Rachel confirmed delivery. Signature required. Uncle Ray told me Gerald sat at the kitchen table reading it. He read it twice. Then he folded it, put it back in the envelope, and sat there for a very long time. He didn't call anyone that night. He didn't call anyone the next day either. The man who had controlled the Warden family narrative for 5 years was, for the first time, out of words. 2 weeks after the party, Uncle Ray showed up at my office in Austin. He didn't call ahead, just appeared in the lobby holding a brown paper bag and wearing a flannel shirt that probably cost $12. Drove down from Portland, he said. Brought you a sandwich. We ate on the rooftop terrace of my building. Turkey clubs. Like when I was 10 and he'd take me fishing and we'd eat gas station sandwiches on the dock. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is from your father. He asked me to bring it because he doesn't have your address. I told him I'd deliver it, but I wouldn't lobby for him. I'm the mailman, not the ambassador. I took the envelope, plain white. My name handwritten on the front in Gerald's precise accountant's script. No return address. I opened it at my desk that evening, alone. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten. His penmanship was slightly uneven. He'd been pressing too hard with the pen in places. He started by admitting he was wrong. That part took half a page. Then he pivoted, and I felt the old machinery begin to turn. I was scared you were ruining your life. I didn't know how else to protect you. Every time I heard about another friend's child succeeding, I felt like I'd failed as a father. I realize now that I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting myself. That last sentence surprised me. It was the most honest thing Gerald Warden had ever written. He ended with, I'm proud of you. I always was. I just didn't know how to show it. I folded the letter, set it on my desk, stared at it. I didn't believe the last part. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You don't spend 5 years telling 40 people your daughter is a failure and then claim you were proud all along. That's not how pride works. But the part about protecting himself, that rang true. Gerald wasn't a monster. He was a man with a very small definition of success and a very large need to control the story. When I stepped outside his definition, he didn't know how to follow, so he rewrote me into something he could explain. I brought the letter to Dr. Nguyen. I don't hate him, I said, but I don't trust him, and I don't know if I ever will. She looked at me. Trust isn't a switch, Tori. It's a bridge, and he burned his side years ago. If he wants to rebuild it, he does the work, not you. That night, I sent Gerald an email. 12 words. I received your letter. Thank you. I'm not ready to talk yet. When I am, I'll reach out. Please respect that. He didn't reply. For the first time in 5 years, Gerald Warden respected a boundary I set. It was the smallest step, but it was the first real one. My mother called on a Sunday in July. I was on my balcony watching the sun go down over Austin, holding a glass of iced tea I hadn't taken a single sip from. Her name lit up the screen. Not home, not mom and dad. I'd changed the contact to just mom 2 years ago, a small act of separation that felt enormous at the time. Tori? Her voice was different, steadier, like a woman who'd been practicing what to say. Hi, Mom. A pause. Then she spoke, and I realized she hadn't been practicing at all. She was just finally telling the truth. I'm sorry I never stood up for you. I was a coward. I watched your father rewrite who you were, and I stood in that kitchen and said nothing, year after year. I gripped the railing. I knew it was wrong. Every time he picked up the phone and called someone to tell them you were struggling, I knew, and I told myself it was easier to stay quiet than to fight him. She took a shaky breath. There is no excuse for that. You're right, I said. My voice was thick. There isn't. I heard her swallow. That hurt more than anything he said, Mom, because I always knew you loved me, and you let him do it anyway. She cried. Not the quiet kind from the party, real crying, the kind that breaks open a chest. I know. I'm not asking for excuses. I'm asking for different. I'm seeing a counselor. She said it quickly, like she'd been saving it. Gerald doesn't know, but I needed to talk to someone. I needed to understand why I stayed silent. Now I was crying. I'm glad, Mom. I really am. We stayed on the phone for 2 hours that night. I told her things I'd never told anyone in the family. About sleeping on the office couch, about Patricia Voss, about the night I won a SAS Industry Award and stood on stage accepting it with no one in the audience who shared my name. I wish I'd been there, she said. Me too, Mom. Me too. When we hung up, the iced tea was warm and the sky was dark, and something that had been locked in my chest for 5 years had shifted. Not opened, not healed, but shifted. The way a bone resets before it can begin to mend. Brenda Warden was never going to be the mother who charged into battle, but she was, for the first time, becoming the mother who refused to look away. And right now, that was enough. 6 months after the party. December. My office. I keep 2 business cards in my desk drawer. One is a fresh print, the kind I hand to investors and conference contacts. The other is the one I carried in my blazer that night in June. It has a small crease from where Gerald's fingers folded around it before the glass fell. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it's proof. Not proof of my company or my title. Proof that I showed up. People ask me sometimes if that night was worth it. If I regret it. If I'd do it differently. I tell them I didn't go to that party to win. I went because if I didn't, I would have spent the rest of my life living inside Gerald's version of me. The dropout, the waitress, the one they loved anyway. And that version was a prison I built by never walking out the door. Slate is still growing. 65 employees now, a new round of funding and discussions. I was invited to speak at a restaurant tech conference in Chicago. When I introduced myself on stage, my name is Tori Warden, CEO of Slate Systems. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the need to add, and yes, I went to college. Or, it's a real company. Or any of the disclaimers I used to rehearse in my bathroom mirror. That might be the biggest change. Not the revenue, not the valuation. The fact that I can say my own name in a room full of strangers and feel like it belongs there. I spent 5 years thinking I needed my father's approval. Turns out, I just needed my own. I still haven't spoken to Gerald directly. Not because I hate him. Not because I'm punishing him. Because I'm waiting to see if he changes because he was exposed. or because he actually understands what he did. There's a difference. And after 5 years of half-truths, I've learned to wait for the real thing. Uncle Ray gives me updates. I don't ask for them. He just calls on Sundays and weaves them in between stories about his furniture orders and whatever book he's reading. Gerald started therapy, a counselor in Fairfield, Tuesdays at 4. Some weeks he goes, some weeks he doesn't. Ray says the weeks he skips are the weeks he'd have to talk about the hard stuff. He's trying, Ray told me once. I'll give him that. Whether he's trying hard enough, that's for you to decide. Gerald sends me an email every month. Short. Never more than 3 sentences. No demands. No guilt. Saw Slate mentioned on Bloomberg today. Hope you're well. And last month, happy birthday, Tori. No strings attached. I read every one. I haven't replied to any of them, but I haven't deleted them either. They sit in a folder I labeled pending. Kyle told me something last week that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Gerald dismantled his study. The room he'd spent 30 years filling with framed degrees, CPA certificates, photos of himself shaking hands with the county comptroller, gone. He boxed everything up and put it in the garage. He left one photo on the wall, me, 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders at Riverside Park, both of us laughing, my hands gripping his hair, his hands gripping my ankles. Kyle sent me a picture of the wall, just the one frame, a single nail. I stared at that photo for a long time. That man, the one in the picture, the one holding me up, that's the father I remember having. That's the father who disappeared somewhere between my first day of college and a phone call in October. I don't know if Gerald can find that man again. Maybe this study is just another performance. Maybe dismantling the trophies is his way of rebuilding the narrative. Look at me, I've changed. Or maybe it's real. Maybe he took down every frame because he finally realized that none of those certificates ever told him who his daughter was. I don't know yet, but the photo stays, and so does the door. If you're still here, if you've been listening this whole time, I want to say something directly to you, not as a CEO, not as someone with a revenge story, just as a woman who spent too many years letting someone else write her name tag. If someone in your family is lying about you, reshaping you into a version that serves their pride and buries yours, you don't need a $40 million company to prove them wrong. You don't need proof at all. The only thing you need is the willingness to say out loud or just to yourself, the version of me you're telling people about is not who I am, and I refuse to live inside that story. I didn't cut Gerald out of my life, but I drew a line so clear that no one, not him, not my mother, not my brother, not a single cousin at a single holiday, could pretend it wasn't there. That line isn't a wall, it's a door. The key is on Gerald's side. If he changes, truly, deeply, not just because he got caught but because he understands, the door is open. It always has been. But I'm not standing on my side of it waiting anymore. I have a company to run. I have people who depend on me. I have a life that doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. It's Tuesday morning in Austin. The skyline is orange. My coffee is hot. My phone just buzzed. A new email from Gerald.